Got it.
Craig, why don't you take a few moments to introduce yourself and move forward?
Got you. Well, Ruth, thank you so much for the warm introduction. And like Ruth mentioned, like we met a couple of years ago in Columbus, and Ruth has played a pretty integral part in my story because we met. I think I was like this resume writing event that you were hosting,
Yes, I was hosting a
and
workshop. Mhm.
what Ruth really helped me to do was find clarity in my career path. And the interesting thing about my path has been very, very non-traditional, non-linear, um, to the fullest extent. And so I was actually trying to find some traditional jobs, trying to enter into corporate America when I moved back to Columbus. But like working with Ruth and like going through my history and getting my resume redone just kind of reiterated that like I'm an entrepreneur. So like there was no reason for me to really go look for these jobs when like my whole future has been, embedded in me creating and launching, successful businesses. So I just want to give Ruth kudos for, helping me to find that clarity
Oh,
when
thank
we
you.
met. So that was a really awesome way to kick this off. So everybody can see my screen, right? You see the title of this presentation is Trust the Process. And that's the key word here is trusting the process, because as Ruth alluded to, life is a journey and it's a process, and starting a business is not for the faint of heart. But with these 5 quick and easy tips, you could overcome that fear of failure to start a business, because that's ultimately the number one barrier that you're going to encounter is yourself and your mindset. And that's going to either allow you to move forward or stay where you're at. So like I said, just to reintroduce myself, my name is Craig, and I'm an award-winning author and business strategist. And like what I really do is I help entrepreneurs to overcome the fear of failure and build profitable businesses. And to me, I have a really unique definition when it comes to entrepreneurship. In my book, Burdens of a Dream, I defined a creative entrepreneur as anyone who takes a calculated risk to create something out of nothing and share it with the world. And so a lot of people mistakenly only associate entrepreneurship with creating a business. But to me, entrepreneurship is really more about creating a life where you have more control of your time, money, and energy. But the most important factor here is that you have to take a calculated risk. Like none of this happens by accident. And if you're just going to let fear hold you back, nothing's ever going to change. You have to plan for the future, learn from the past, but take massive action in the present so that you could create something out of nothing, which is that business, which is going to allow you to live the life that you really want to live. But like I said, it's been really interesting. I've been a full-time business strategist, business coach for the past 2.5, 3 years. And it's been interesting, talking to a lot of clients. And a lot of them have like the same typical limiting beliefs. A lot of them will say, hey, I don't have enough time to start a business. I don't have enough money to start enough business. I don't have enough energy, not enough knowledge, not enough support. But one of the interesting things is that all you have to do is open up a book, turn on the TV, go on YouTube, and you could find endless use cases of people who started successful businesses where they didn't have enough time, where they didn't have enough money, where they didn't have enough energy, knowledge, or support. All of these limiting beliefs are just that they're limiting, they're self-limiting, because if you really want to become an entrepreneur, you will do whatever it takes to pursue that path and take that calculated risk to create something out of nothing and share it with the world. And so after kind of going through all these different case studies, it's like, okay, what's really going on? Because when people got time, they didn't start businesses. When they got money, they didn't start businesses. When they had the energy, the knowledge, all the support, they still didn't start businesses. So like, what was the underlying belief? We'll get to that in a little second. But at the end of the day, like the cost of doing nothing is probably the largest cost you'll ever endure, because life will happen to you. If you don't do anything, you're going to be stuck in the same place, which is probably where you don't want to be at. If you don't do anything, you may never get that increase in pay that you need or that you deserve for your true value that you're not receiving at your current job. If you don't do anything, you're going to continue to be disengaged and unfulfilled, which is something that I just couldn't tolerate. But like I said, during this, time that we're living in, you might have lost your job. So you might be forced to, pursue your own venture, or at least take back more control of your life, by starting your own business. But ultimately, like if you don't do anything, you're going to be suffering from this thing called regret, where you're just still dreaming and wondering about what could be. And that's just not a place that I ever wanted to find myself in. But like I said, when I introduced this topic about trusting the process, I'm going to provide you with 5 quick and easy tips to overcome the fear of failure. And really, that's the main reason why I believe most people don't start businesses, is that they're just afraid to fail. And that's natural. Like, it's okay. Like, we're all human. And a lot of us, we're trained to fight, flight, or freeze. Like, that's just our reptilian brain, doing what it does best. But if you just let your emotions take control over your mind and you can't think logically, it's going to be difficult for you to really make that best decision that you need to make, which could be starting a business. But like I said, most people will never admit that it's the fear of failure that's holding them back. And guess what? Fear does 5 main things, which really, really are not positive. Number 1 is that fear is going to prevent growth. Like I said, a lot of people, they just want to stay the same. They want to stay stagnant. And that's because that fear is luring them into this idea that, complacency is okay, that not making a move is okay. But guess what? Staying in the same place is making a decision. And so I don't think, you want to prevent your growth by allowing fear to overcome your thought process. Secondly, is that fear, it's the number 1 killer of dreams. Like, somebody told me, it's like this cliched saying that the cemetery is the wealthiest place on earth, because so many dreams are buried there. And that there's so many people who wanted to do things, but they just allowed fear to hold them back. And so for me, and my mentality is, not coming from much. It's like the one thing I always knew is that no would be the ultimate answer if I didn't do anything. The only way you can convert a no into a yes is to do something. So that's why I never let fear hold me back. I mentioned this before. Fear, it also brings on regret. It's like, hey, if fear feels good at first, it's very comfortable. But over time, you're really going to regret not doing what you really want to do, which could be starting a business. Next, what fear does to a lot of people is that it induces analysis paralysis. We've all been victims of that, where we're overthinking, waiting for the perfect timing, waiting for the stars to align, and that never ever happens. Eventually, you're just going to have to take that calculated risk to make that move to start that business. But fear is just going to induce that analysis paralysis, which ultimately and ironically traps you in your own mind. And I always tell people, it's like the person that you see in the mirror is either your best friend or your own worst enemy. And when you let fear take over and induce that analysis paralysis and trap you in your own mind, you're not your best friend anymore. You're now your own worst enemy. And that doesn't make any sense. So like I said, it's a natural human instinct to be scared and be fearful, to take a calculated risk to start a business. But if you do that, you're going to be able to live a life that most people, can only dream of. And so here in this presentation, like, not only do I want to give you those 5 quick and easy tips to overcome the fear of failure, but I just want to lead with this by telling you how I overcame the fear of failure, and how, I'm qualified to help you start a business. And this is because I've actually done this several times. Like, I've literally failed my way to success, but like, that's the only way life's going to work. Like, inevitably, you're going to make mistakes when you're trying things you've never done before. And so just realize that there is no failure. There's only feedback. And as I defined in my book, I think it's chapter 31, entitled Fail. Fail just means a first attempt in learning. That's literally all it means. So just go with me on this journey real quick, and I'm going to tell you a little story about myself and how I overcame the fear of failure to start multiple businesses. So my name's Craig. Like, I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. But growing up, I moved around a lot because of my father's job. And kind of like that picture you see on the screen with all the frustration is not only how my father felt, but how I felt, because constantly had to move. But one of the lessons my father taught me at a young age, he's like, okay, if there are no opportunities where you're at, you're going to have to go change your environment and move to a new place, to really, find new opportunities that are going to be more beneficial to you. And so I saw him overcome that fear of failure, to start at a new company and to rise up and level in his career. And that's something that I really admired about him from the start. And so the next pit stop from Cincinnati was Cleveland. And this was a really difficult time for me because as a child, I had a severe speech impediment. I stuttered extensively. It was really hard for me to, articulate myself. And every now and then when I get really, really excited, I might stutter or a little bit, but that's just because I get so excited about what I'm talking about. But like the lesson I learned here in life was my mother told me, she's like, if you have a problem, you might just have to solve it. And so every day after class, after practice, I would do hooked on phonics through middle school. And kind of the irony is that like I used to be a chronic stutterer, but now I get paid to speak and I speak actually 3 languages fluently. And so none of that would have happened if I wouldn't have been able to overcome those difficulties. So from Cleveland down to Columbus, when I was 15, and this is when I first dabbled in entrepreneurship. I actually was a teen DJ, believe it or not. Don't make fun of me, but my DJ name was Absolute Craig, spelled like the vodka Absolute. And, I DJed for several years, but this was something that I had to do because my parents didn't have a lot of disposable income. So I used that money to buy my own car and to have fun. But that's when I had my first taste for starting a business. But at that same time, I was a really highly recruited athlete, wound up getting a Division I football scholarship that took me down to Birmingham, Alabama. And that was my whole identity, was athletics. I had these NFL dreams from my childhood, but everything changed my sophomore year when I had a neck and leg injury that ended my playing career. And so I kind of wanted to tie that in today because a lot of people, just like I had an identity with athletics, a lot of people only have identities with their jobs or where they work or how they work or their career field or whatever. And life changes. And just like my NFL dreams got blown up, sometimes our career dreams get blown up as well. And that might be a sign that we have to pivot onto something else that we've never thought of before. But just like I help people to, create their own careers and by giving them sound advice, this beautiful woman you see on the screen was my Spanish professor. And she intervened in my life when I thought about quitting and dropping out of school. And she's like, Craig, you should study abroad in Costa Rica. You're my best Spanish student. Maybe you should get some clarity, get some gravity, take a little break and, refresh yourself. And going to Costa Rica was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. I mean, they say la pura vida, which means like the pure life. And it's just kind of an analogy for just relaxing and taking life one step at a time. And there I got to rest, which is going to be my first tip for you, moving forward. But this really rejuvenated me to come back to school and change my life. And so I actually switched my major to entrepreneurship and started DJing to make ends meet because I didn't have a full athletic scholarship anymore. And so this leads into my first tip that I'm going to give you for today. But just like in my book, I like to foreshadow everything with quotes. And so this quote's from Jennifer Young. And she says, life is hard enough without the added fear, panic, and anxiety. Your soul is crying out for love and encouragement. Take a moment to breathe deep, get present, and find some compassion for yourself. And that's what I was able to do in Costa Rica. I was able to rest. And that's the first tip for overcoming the fear of failure to start a business. Now, you have to take time to relax, clear your mind, and mentally recover. And this is true because you can't pour into somebody else's cup if your cup is empty. And you damn sure can't start a business if you're empty and you don't have any energy. So the first thing you have to do is rest and put yourself first. And so, like I said, I was healed. I found my second win. And like I said, I came back to school, started DJing, majored in entrepreneurship, and I went to Spain for 6 months to study abroad again. And that really locked in my love for international business. I just didn't know how this was going to foreshadow what my life would be like over the next couple of years. And so I graduated and I was like, I have to get the hell out of Alabama. This isn't the place for me. There's a very, very obvious ceiling here. And so I took my parents' advice to go down to Tampa and get my MBA. And it was insane because I knocked out a 2-year program in 1 year, which is nuts. But it's what I had to do to get out. But at the end of my academic studies, I had a major decision to make. I was interviewing at big tech companies and like Apple in New York City, San Francisco, but I just didn't feel like, this was going to be the best career move for myself. And I was like, I want to do something that's more fulfilling and less cookie cutter. And it's interesting the way life works, because before I flew back to Tampa, I met this Peace Corps recruiter at a Chipotle in Manhattan. And she's like, they'll pay you for 2.5 years, not that much money, to go work abroad and help people out in different countries. And this leads into the second tip for today, foreshadowed by this amazing quote from Jim Rohn. And he says, if you don't design your own life plan, chances are you'll fall into someone else's plan. And guess what they have planned for you? Not much. And when I was in those interviews, listening to those hiring managers, I could just tell that I was just going to be a cog on their wheel, and they didn't have much planned for me. And I'm like, I want to do more than just sit in a cubicle all day. So I strategized and created a plan to get into the Peace Corps. And this is the second tip for overcoming the fear of failure to start a business, is that you got to strategize. You have to analyze your options, create a plan, and start executing. Like just quitting your job and going into a new business venture is probably the worst thing you could do. And this is why you have to rest and then strategize, create a plan, and start testing some of your ideas, before you even think about making a plunge. But more on that later. But tip number 2 is definitely you have to strategize. And so here comes the Peace Corps, which was probably one of the most fulfilling experiences I've ever had in my life. Like I could talk for days about this. And so I went to Peru, where I did economic development consulting and basically high-level business coaching with a lot of medium and small businesses throughout the country. At the same time, I was also a licensed professor, where I taught entrepreneurship in colleges and in high schools. But even before I went down to Peru, I'm like, I'm going to start a business here. I just don't know how this is going to happen. And so when I was teaching at an agro institute, my co-professor was a distiller. And so after class, he taught me how to distill pisco, which is like the Peruvian national alcoholic beverage. And so what I did kind of illegally under the table is that I took that pisco we made and I sold it to the farmers that you see in the middle of the screen. And I built a massive following, so much so that this inspired me to immigrate back to Peru after my Peace Corps service. And I opened up the first branded craft distillery in the country. And it was a crazy, crazy journey. And it was super successful. I mean, in less than 9 months, I got 4 different products to market. We exported some of our beverages to Mexico, Chile, and the US, and I actually outgrew my space. And so when I approached my landlord to extend my lease, she sadly confessed to me that she did not own the property. Her twin sister was actually the true owner of the building. And so even though I had been there for over a year, I was technically illegally occupying that space. And so they did a bait and switch. The business environment down there is way different. And so they gave me a new contract that was twice as expensive and half as long. And so I could not afford that. And so I unexpectedly had to shut down my dream business. And so this leads us into the third tip for overcoming the fear of failure to start a business. And this quote from Mary Ann Radmacher is so powerful. And she says, unexpected events can set you back or set you up. It's all a matter of perspective. And the third tip for overcoming the fear of failure to start a business is to reflect. That's because setbacks are inevitable, but every life event can be transformed into a learning lesson. And so it's much easier said than done. But when I was on the plane from Peru back to the US, like I really reflected on my journey and like the lessons I learned from that experience. And that's where I came up with my definition of fail, is that it's a first attempt in learning. Like I had literally done something that no other American had ever done before. Like nobody had opened up a distillery in Peru that wasn't from Peru. And so, was I over my head? Maybe, maybe not. Was I naive? Maybe, maybe not. But that whole process was so fulfilling. And my 3.5 years in Peru was literally like 35 years of life experience, just really, really compressed. And so, unfortunately, I didn't follow the advice that I'm giving you today. I was so upset with what happened that I was like, I'm not supposed to be back in the US. I'm going to go back overseas. And so I moved to Costa Rica and I was managing a travel company outside of San Juan. And instead of taking the time to rest, instead of taking the time to strategize, instead of taking the time to reflect, I went right into this business and tried to run this company like it was my own. And for anybody who's done that, it doesn't work out too well. And so regardless of whether I was right or not with what I was doing, I was making them a lot of money, but I didn't take the time to really analyze the culture there. And so I ultimately got fired from that job. I'd never been fired before. And that sent me back into another limbo. And I found myself in Baltimore, literally on my sister's couch, not doing much and just kind of like sulking and wondering like, what was I going to do? And I was just kind of trapped in my own mind. And like I said, it's okay. Like we're all human. We all go through these sets of emotions. But ultimately, I realized that if anything in life was going to change, I had to be the person to make that decision. Like my family supported me at a place to stay, which really helped me to get some clarity. But nobody was going to help me unless I decided to help myself first. And so that leads into tip number 4 and this 4th quote from Sylvia Earle. And she says, hold up a mirror and ask yourself what you are capable of doing and what you really care about. Then take the initiative. Don't wait for someone else to ask you to act. And that's what I did. And so tip 4 for overcoming the fear of failure to start a business is to be resourceful. Like, don't be afraid to reach out to your network and ask for help. One of the worst thing any entrepreneurs can do is just work in a vacuum. And the funny thing about that is that you cannot grow a business selling to yourself. You need a customer base. You need people to support you. You need people to help you, particularly when you're getting started. And that's what people like myself do. I offer proven strategies to help entrepreneurs build profitable businesses, leveraging like their skills and talents. And so for me, with this piece of advice, that's what I did, is that I reached out to my network for help. And I built up a pretty good network with the Peace Corps. I was in the DMV area. And this was what landed me a job at a really fast growing tech company in Washington, D.C. I was their lead project manager, helped to build cell phone towers all across the US. And it was really kind of me being an entrepreneur inside of a company. But as Ruth and I both know, like I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And so when I had this job on the side, I launched one of my new startups called Visa Jump. And we were the world's first travel visa processing platform leveraged by blockchain. So I had a team in the US, I had a team in Vietnam. We got a little bit of venture funding, but ultimately, it was really difficult to manage teams that are 12 hours apart. And so after about a year, that project fizzled out. And then at the same time, the company I was worked at got acquired by, I think it was AT&T. So I had the opportunity to either stay on or take a severance package. And so for me, I was like, let me get the check and move on to something else. And at that same time, a lot of things were transitioning. My grandmother was getting a little sick. She later transitioned on. My family was kind of going through some different things. And I was like, you know what, maybe it's time to come back, to Ohio. It had been over a decade. All this stuff I told you had transpired. And so it was time for me to come back full circle. But once again, it was like, okay, I had to figure out what my next best step was. And so this leads into the final tip and the second to final quote in this presentation. But this one's from my nice Neen. And she says, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. And this is what it really talks about fear. And that actually fear is more painful than, actual faith. And so the 5th tip I want to give for you for overcoming the fear of failure to start a business is that ultimately you got to be bold. Like you can't be afraid to share your gifts and talents with the world. And so, like I said, I'm tie Ruth into this presentation. So when we met, I was actually trying to find my way again. Like I said, I was interviewing at all these different companies. People were giving me the runaround. Oh, you're really entrepreneurial. You're really great. I go through 6 interviews and then not get a job. And it's just like, okay, what's really going on? Like, who am I? What should I really be doing next? And so I realized that I had a really powerful story to tell. And so I just went around Columbus, just sharing my story, trying to build networks. I'm trying to build relationships. I hate the word networking, but I tried to build as many relationships as possible. And I ran into a guy that had a publishing company. And he's like, Craig, you got a book in you. And I'm like, no, I don't, man. He's like, yeah, you do. And so, I signed that little indie publishing deal. And when I sat down, like that book project transmuted from just this little idea into like a calling. And so the first lines of my book are as follows. I say, this book is dedicated to all those who will dare to abandon the status quo, follow the road not taken, and discover the person they're truly meant to become. And so as much as I was writing those words to my readers, I was writing those words to myself. And I was really hiding who I was in a lot of these interviews, and maybe people caught on to it, but I'm just like, okay, I shouldn't just run away from who I really am. And that's this entrepreneur that I've always been, but I just had to transform into, a different version. And so, like I said, it took a long time to come full circle. But like now I finally feel that like I'm positioned in the right place to leverage my skills, to leverage my passions, but to also satisfy market demand, because there's a lot of people who want to start businesses, a lot of people who want to become entrepreneurs. But based upon my experiences, my credibility, and what I've done to date, I'm well positioned to do what I do. And so, like I said, I'm a paid public speaker now. I used to be a chronic stutterer. That's been conquered. My book won the best entrepreneurship book of 2020. That is an honor. But like I said, what I feel most important about is that I am who I truly am, and that I wasn't afraid, to become the person that I was meant to become. So in sum, the 5 tips to overcome the fear of failure to start a business is: number 1, you got to rest. Like, you have to fill yourself up. Like, we're living in a world where a billion things are happening. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. A meteor could hit the earth. Like, who knows? Anything's possible. But before you decide to make any moves, like, you have to get clarity, and you have to rest and take some time for yourself. 2, after you rest, you got to strategize. You have to create a plan. This is where like people like me come into play. Like, I say business strategists first. Like, entrepreneurs, like, coaching is valuable, but you need a strategy. And a strategy is really an iterative plan that's going to help you to accomplish your goals. And that iterative is the key word, because you're always going to get hit with a curveball. But if it's iterative, if it's flexible, you can know how to respond to whatever life throws you. So after you strategize, 3, you have to reflect. Like, a lot of us, we're super accomplished. Like, we've done a lot of great things in our lives, but a lot of us, kind of beat ourselves up. Like, we're our own worst enemies, as I alluded to before. But if you reflect on just how far you've come, you'd be like, wow, like, I've done a lot of great stuff in my life. And kind of that really, empowers you to move forward to step number 4, which is being resourceful. Like I said, it's really hard to do this stuff on your own. Like, I really don't believe anybody on earth is self-made. Like, they're always saying, oh, you're self-made, or you're a self-made millionaire or billionaire. And it's like, wrong. Nobody does anything really by themselves. And particularly in business, like, you're going to need help, getting off the ground. You're going to need help developing your systems and processes. You're going to need help marketing, whatever. None of us can do it ourselves. And that's why being resourceful is super important, because like, if you're short on resources, you're short on people. So that's why people play such a valuable part in our lives. And then last but not least, the ultimate tip here, you don't take anything away from this presentation. You got to be bold. Like, if you don't do anything, nothing's going to change. Like, not doing anything is a decision, and it's a bad decision. And like I said, failure is just a first attempt in learning. Like, if you want to do something, just figure out what your next best step is. Like, a lot of us, we have these big, hairy, audacious goals, and we want to go from 0 to hero overnight. That doesn't happen. But if you're like, okay, hey, what do I have to do tomorrow? Or what do I have to do today to get me to tomorrow? That's being bold. And that's a strategic way to move forward and really start your business. And so I said this before, this is the last quote. I love quotes, as you see, but in life, there's no failure. There's just feedback. And if you can develop that kind of entrepreneurial mentality where you're resilient, you're resourceful, like you see opportunities and problems, like you're never going to lose. And so just understand that, like, there is no failure. there's only feedback. And so after seeing all this stuff I threw at you, my question to you is, are you afraid to fail? Are you still afraid to fail? And if so, that's okay. But just know that like failure is something that we can all overcome. And all it takes is a decision to, move you from, failure to faith. Because when you move from failure to faith, that's when, everything changes for the better. And so, like I said, I wanted to, present myself to you, let you know about my story and my background, and let you know what I'm all about. Because like I said, what I'm really here to do is that like I really help people to become the entrepreneurs of their lives. It's not just about building a business. Like the business that you build is ultimately a vehicle that should be taking you to where you want to go. Your business should be working for you. And like I said, when people start their journey, they typically go through these 4 stages. Like the first stage is this analysis paralysis. Like they're stuck in their head and they're trying to figure out, oh, is this the right time to transition into entrepreneurship? And like I said, it just takes time. It's okay to be here. But ultimately, you're going to have to get to a starting point. Like you can't stay in analysis paralysis all day. Eventually, you're going to have to get some clarity. You're going to have to figure out, your best business idea. You have to figure out, what do you really want to create? But then ultimately after that, Ruth spoke to this earlier, is that you're going to have to commit to this process, because it's not easy, but the rewards of doing this are well worth the investment if you're willing to persevere and not give up. But ultimately, like my whole goal through my whole process is to get people to, what I define as freedom. And that's where like your business is working for you and like you're living the way you want to live, which could be working 18-hour days, which could be working 9-hour days, which could be not working at all. Who knows? But you have to define that for yourself. But the ultimate goal is to help you build a business that serves you, your family, your life, and your loved ones, and whoever, you see in your world. And so, like I said, I've worked with hundreds of different entrepreneurs from all over the world, all different backgrounds, all different genders. And, I've been really successful at what I do. And like I said, I really have a passion and a love for helping people to not just build a businesses, but to become the entrepreneurs of their lives. Because like your life and your business, they're going to be intertwined, because your business oftentimes is a reflection of who you are at that moment. So when you really understand that, you're really going to be able to tap into your secret sauce and create something that people really, really enjoy. So like I said, there's 2 ways people really work with me. Like the first thing is my online entrepreneur affirmation bootcamp. It's a self-paced program that really takes you from idea to implementation to income. I could drop some links later in this chat, so you can check it out for yourself. And also I'll provide my email and contact information so you can learn more about it. But if you're not ready, for that program, like you should really definitely check out the book and the workbook. Like it's really going to give you solid pieces of wisdom to help you to develop that proactive entrepreneurial mindset and really help you to take that next best step toward creating your own business. But like I said, I really thank you, Ruth, for allowing me to share my story with your audience. And I'd love to answer any questions that anybody may have. And I'll put my contact information in the chat too. So I really
And I'm going, and
as
I post this on YouTube, I'm going to also put your information in the description for anybody who may be coming across this. And I am now, thank you, Craig, so much. This was really great. And I'm going to stop the recording before we get on to the questions.